Hello and welcome back to the Bookshelf Odyssey, and welcome back to my Victober series, Distracted by Dickens. And today is one I've been really excited to share with you, and that is looking at the short story collections that Dickens edited and wrote for, which really has an interesting history, I think. It begins, as all good things do, with A Christmas Carol. And in 1843, Dickens wrote A Christmas Carol. He wrote it in like a 6-week manic writing frenzy and designed the book, got it published, got it to the presses, and history was made. It was so popular that people began to expect more Christmas stories from Dickens. So the following year, he wrote The Chimes, which is actually a New Year's story, but taking place over, Christmas time, the 12 days of Christmas. And then he wrote several more. And this began to be a kind of a burden on him, as he's also writing novels and traveling and different things like that. So in 1848, he wrote what would be his final Christmas novella called The Haunted Man and the Ghost Bargain. Now, these stories, with the exception of A Christmas Carol, don't really feature Christmas very heavily or at all. And in fact, at least one of them takes place in like springtime or something. You can kind of misunderstand it when we refer to them as Dickens's Christmas novels. It was more just the novels he wrote at Christmas time. So he needed a break. As we go into the 1850s, he began to publish a magazine called Household Words. He was the editor. It contained stories and articles, things like that. Imprinted almost this idea of the Victorian family, sitting around the fire, reading these stories, addressing issues that had to do with the household, with family life. He did write an essay called What Christmas Is as We Grow Older, a wonderful little reflective piece. In order to meet the publishers and audience demands of wanting Christmas stories, he had this idea of publishing a special Christmas edition of his newspaper, of his magazine, whatever you want to call it. That's where these books come in, and I want to show you a little bit in more detail what these books are and the stories they contain. I don't have all of the collections yet. I'm working on it. Part of the problem is you'll see collected The Holly Tree Inn by Dickens, and what you'll get is the first and last story, because those are by Dickens. It's one called The Guest and one called The Bill. But you're missing the stories by other writers in between. And another one they do that for is The Wreck of the Golden Mary. I've read the 2 chapters that Dickens wrote, but you missed the other short stories. And basically that one is survivors from the wreck of a ship are in a rowboat, stuck in the ocean, and they're telling stories to each other. And that's how they bring in the collection. So it's like these narrative devices that Dickens uses. But I just want to show you what I do have, and maybe in the table of contents, so you can kind of see what it is that we have today that Dickens put together. And so without any further ado, Jeeves, to the overhead camera. Thank you, Jeeves. Not the best setup, sorry, but just so you can get a look at this book. This company has made a couple of these stories that I've really enjoyed looking at. But so this first one that came out in 1852 was called A Round of Stories by the Christmas Fire. Get a nice little introduction there. But then let's get to the table of contents. You have the stories that you'll find in this. Now, you will see a lot reprinted, the poor relations story and the child story, but you won't get these other stories mentioned, and they're so good, like the old nurse's story. You'll find that reprinted in separate editions, but that's a good scary ghost story. So these were designed to be like books that were read around the fireplace at Christmas time. Yeah. So of note, I think you get one of the earlier collaborations of Dickens and Gaskell. So here in the introduction, you get a sense of what Dickens was trying for. This is an extra number of household words, so it's like a special Christmas episode that I know England does a lot. Their TV shows will have a special Christmas episode. Doctor Who does it. I'm more familiar with that. So it's being conducted by Charles Dickens, being carefully worded there because he wants to make sure they know he's not writing these stories, but he's organized, he's edited, he has compiled them. In some cases, he has helped rewrite them. But this is basically, here are stories that you can read around the fireplace at Christmas time. So any good book needs a sequel, right? And so we have the following year, another round of stories by the Christmas fire. And again, published by the same company. They just do beautiful work. And you get all of all of the collected stories. So here in this one, which I haven't read yet, but I will be reading this during Victober, you get The Schoolboy's Story by Charles Dickens, which I don't think I've read that. I don't recall. So I'm really excited about getting into that to see if I've read it or not. Let's see, anything other of note. I recognize Adelaide and Procter. She's somebody who has written with Dickens before. You get another Elizabeth Gaskell story. And you can kind of see an ongoing theme here. And then you get the Scholar's Story written by Gaskell and her husband, Reverend William Gaskell. So that's of interest, I think. I haven't read that one yet. And you get this collection of, different people's stories of different walks of life, almost similar to what he wrote back with in Sketches of Boz, just different snapshots and characters in their story. Imagine these kinds of people sitting around the fireplace sharing their stories. Now, I don't know if any of these are ghostly or gothic or not, as I haven't read these yet. Here you get some more information. This is the extra Christmas number of 1853 in household words. So yeah, there's that one. So again, by the same company, we have The Seven Poor Travelers. I don't think I've read this one either. So I've got some things yet to read. And now this is the following year. You get from Christmas 1854, again with household words. You get this collection. You get again a series of interconnecting stories. And here, if I remember right, here's how the story gets set up. He says, strictly speaking, there were only 6 poor travelers, but being a traveler myself, though an idle one, and being withal as poor as I hope to be, I brought the number up to 7. And so he's basically talking about, introducing, here's the story of how we all got together as travelers in this inn, and we started sharing stories. Of note there is one by Wilkie Collins, the 4th poor traveler. Collins and Dickens would become friends. They would have travels together and write together a few times. This foreword mentions that the story by Wilkie Collins is regarded as the first British detective story, which may or may not be true. I'm sure there's out there a Victorian woman who actually did it first that doesn't get credit for it. But that's maybe a video for another day. Anyway, so there's that one, The Seven Poor Travelers. And what's fun about reading these, as I know I've mentioned, is you don't have to read them at Christmas time because a lot of them don't feel as Christmassy as A Christmas Carol. Another collection is A House to Let. See if this gives any information as to when it came out. So you get Over the Way by Charles Dickens and Wilkie Collins. So they combined to write a story together. Got another Gaskell there. Procter, as I mentioned, so you get a lot of people in this one that have written with Dickens. It's almost like how there's movie directors today that tend to work with the same actors and the same writers. Like Spielberg, you think Spielberg and John Williams, they just go together. So you get all the usual suspects in this one. A different company than the other three I've showed you, so they don't really tell you much about that. So A House to Let comes a couple years later. So there's a few editions that I don't have yet, but I'm hoping to get them one day. And that came out in 1858. It was the 1858 Household Words edition. I believe Household Words ended in 1859. And so then he goes on to do All the Year Round. Similar format, similar story. So anyway, that's A House to Let. I do remember reading this. I don't know if any of the stories really jumped out at me as being excellent. They might be worth a reread, though. As I've said, my ability to read Victorian literature has matured, and I can do more now than I did, 5 or 10 years ago. And then this one I'm happy about, The Haunted House by Charles Dickens. This is the one that I first bought that I realized, wow, these Christmas editions that you hear about, like, again, The Holly Tree Inn, there are actually more stories in it than just the ones that Dickens wrote. And somehow when you read them all together, it makes more sense. So we get The Haunted House by Charles Dickens. Let's see, what do I want to say about this? We get the introduction here and the different stories in there. And as we explored, some deal with actual ghosts, and some deal with they really play loosely with that name. I believe this came out in 1862 from what the copyright there said. So again, we skip a few years to get to that. We have some helpful extra material there if you want to read that, which, why not? You get Procter, you get Collins, you get Dickens, you get Gaskell, and then George Augustus Sala and Hesba Stretton, which I'm not familiar with her work. I think I remember reading that, though, and that was a good story, kind of a ghost story. And so you get these really readable copies. Oh, yeah, that's a poem, isn't it? And then you get kind of like this opening statement that helps bridge the stories together. Yeah, really, really fantastic. And then the last one that I own is a collection of Mrs. Lirriper. Stories. There's actually two. One is Mrs. Lirriper's Lodgings, and then I believe the next year's was Mrs. Lirriper's Legacy. Mrs. Lirriper runs a house with lodgers. A newborn child is abandoned to her care, and so it's kind of a way to entertain the child. They tell stories for this child, and that's the framing device. Here's the stories in this collection. And the first one was, and this is from 63 and 1864. So right after The Haunted House, I believe, which was 1862. Was that right? Yes. This one was really fun because this one really developed the stories within a story theme. And reading some of these stories outside of this, or not having these stories in it, you kind of, I feel like you miss something. So again, we have Dickens, Gaskell, a couple new names there from what I remember. Amelia Edwards, I know she was had a connection to Dickens. We got a ghost story there of sorts, and then you get the ending story. One that I would love to get that I don't have. Jeeves, put the overhead camera back on. Nobody wants to see my hands. Thank you, that's better. Now, Jeeves. Thank you. Tell you what, it's hard to get good help these days. Anyway, what was I saying? I can't remember now. Jeeves, don't make me fire you during Victober. Anyway, one I want to get is, if you ever get a chance to read Dr. Marigold, that is just a beautiful, wonderful story that not a lot of people know about. It's not as common of a Dickens story, but it is really good. And the framing device is this character who's called a cheapjack. He sells junk, and he comes across this girl he adopts as his daughter, and he becomes a single dad and entertains his daughter, who has a disability, by telling stories and writing out stories for her. And so then you get all the short stories in that collection. And that one I would love to find in a bound edition if it's not yet. You get stories like To Be Taken Immediately by Dickens, Not to Be Taken at Bedtime. I get another story, To Be Taken with a Grain of Salt by Dickens. So it's a lot of these like medicinal sounding stories. Even on its own, if you can read Dr. Marigold as just a short story, it does feel very complete. You see in the story where Dickens inserts the other short stories in that collection. But since these are in the public domain, maybe I have to make my own. I don't know. We'll see. I shouldn't be telling out my ideas on BookTube, maybe. I don't know. Anyway, editing art here to say that as soon as I got done with this video, I got on the internet, worked my magic, and actually found a paperback copy by the Hesperus, by this publisher, of Dr. Marigold's Prescriptions, complete with all the stories in it. So that quickly became mine. It was selling on eBay for like $10. Kind of, I know, a little bit pricey for what it is, but that's been on my to find list for a while now. So I felt like it was worth the price. Anyway, Jeeves, put this back in. Let's get back to the video, Jeeves. Thanks. I hope you enjoyed this video. This was, like I said, one I was really looking forward to talking about, sharing what is on my Dickens bookshelves and maybe an aspect of Dickens that some of you are unfamiliar with. So my next episode of Distracted by Dickens will be out next week, he says, hopefully. And then I want to do something about like a ghost story or something of that Dickens wrote. We'll see what I have time for. But anyway, thanks for coming along. If you are interested in buying editions like this, I will try to find where they are online and leave some links for you. I bought all of these used with the exception of The Haunted House. I found that at a Barnes and Noble randomly, I think. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm at right now on my Dickens collecting journey, is to find the full edition of some of his collected short stories. I've yammered on enough. I hope you're having a great Victober. Let me know down below what you think of Dickens as a short story writer. And we'll continue the conversation there. Until next time, I want to thank you for watching, and I hope that you remain distracted by Dickens. Take care.